the 2nd of November 1943. The gunners at B-24 answer with Browning fire as two Japanese fighters, against what American engineers expected, climb up at 15,000 feet and dive in to wreck the bomber. A short, brutal exchange. Tracers cross, turrets roar, fighters peel and fall. In the end, the gunners' steady bursts claim two enemies Ki-43. Minnesota engineers designed the B-24 for long-range missions. Huge fuel tanks and a high service ceiling to stay above flak and coastal defenses. They assumed the enemy couldn't follow them up there. But Japanese fighters learned to climb to those same altitudes, 15,000 to 20,000 feet. The bomber began to look like an expensive, fragile target too big and valuable to risk on a single raid. Then came a seemingly crazy idea. Don't strip weight, add firepower. Turn the bomber into its own escort by arming it to the teeth. Consolidated B-24D. 10 men aboard. 4 of them live behind Browning triggers. Staff Sergeant Leo Vargas, top turret, former machinist from Fresno. Corporal Eddie, shortstop. Mancini, tail. Ex-sandlot catcher with wrists like rebar. Sergeant Tom Saito, nose turret. A quiet LA kid who can dock tracers on a diving fighter like he's threading a needle. Private Hank Ruiz, right waist, who never misses a weekly letter home and never misses at 2 to 100 yards either. The climb to 15,000 feet is a long, vibrating ascent in thin air. Oil temp steady, turbo superchargers whining, the Emerson nose turret glinting. Each M2 Browning in the ship's 6 positions has been bore-sighted to 400 yards. Every gunner has memorized the sight picture fighter at wingspan in the ring. Hold a plane length ahead if he's crossing fast. The B-24 is a flying box full of gasoline, aluminum, and Browning M2S. Today, the guns matter more than the sheet metal. Over the Bismarck Sea, the formation tightens. Bomb bay doors cracked for ventilation so fumes don't pool. Lucky Lois slides into the low left of the second element, favorite place for interceptors to rake a trailing ship. Perfect bait. The interphone is crisp. Top is up, Vargas calls. Tail cold and clear, nose set. Right waist, ready. The pilot, Captain Ray Decker 26, steady hands keeps them tucked so close you can count rivets on the lead ship's wing. Rabaul's caldera rises through scattered cloud like a fist. Flak begins at the coastline, puffs at 14,000, then 16,000, black, then white, then a speckled wall. Decker holds 15,000. The toggler is already talking them onto a freighter wake in Simpson Harbor. That's when Saito sees them tiny needles on the horizon, turning fat and fast. 11 o'clock high, 2, maybe 4 zeros, 1 Tony above them. The Tony will make the head-on pass, the zeros will scissor through the beam. Standard. Steady, Decker says. Nobody moves except the guns. The M2S hum as turrets traverse. Saito's twin. 50 seconds settle just ahead of the Tony's nose. He doesn't wait to see the pilot's face. He fires a 2-second string at 600 yards to place his ladder, then another at 400 where the table says rounds and target meet. API lights the Tony's radiator flaps like match heads. The fighter yaws, flashes orange at the cowl, and drops out of the sight circle trailing a black spiral. Splash 1, Saito says, already breaking left for the second inbound. Vargas takes the first zero from high 2 o'clock, not chasing, leading. He squeezes in short, savage bursts, zip, 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 keeping barrels cool and dispersion tight. The heavy slugs smash through lightweight wing and spar. Fabric shreds into confetti. The zero flashes belly in a barrel roll and goes by shedding parts. Break. Mancini barks as another zero slides into 6 o'clock low. He walks tracers up from prop wash to canopy. At 15,000 feet the air is thin, the guns slower, but the M2's cadence is still death in quarter-second bites. The Zero's engine cowling erupts, the tail rips free, the pilot never pulls up. Bombs away! The toggler's voice is flat as he hits the pickle. The ship lifts, Decker holds course 2 seconds longer than anyone likes, so the stick walks straight across the harbor. Then he kicks a rudder, slides them out of the flak lane, and the Liberator feels suddenly lighter. The Japanese don't. 4 more fighters form for a coordinated run. Ruiz is already braced on a waste pintle, feeding and firing. He saws the crossing 0.5 at the wing root with pure lead and luck. The interphone is a metronome of calm violence. Top 2 left. Tail, 1 climbing, low. Nose clear. The Brownings don't shout. They solve math. At 15,000 feet, the 50 cal round still carries over 10,000 foot-pounds of energy. Against canvas and 2 mm skin, it's a sledgehammer. Today, it's the difference between a burning B-24 and a bomber stream punching through the flak box over Rabaul. The Japanese expected bombers that could be herded and bled. What they meet instead, at altitude and cold, is a flying fortress by another name, 6M2 Brownings, answering every vector with fire. The return leg from Rabaul was supposed to be routine drop, turn, throttle home. Instead, it became a running brawl in the sky at 15,000 feet. The Japanese regrouped fast. 15 minutes after bomb release, the tail-end Charlies of the 90th Group caught the second wave Zeros and twin-engine Key 45 Nicks, climbing hard from the coast. The Empire had finally learned that American bombers weren't defenseless. What they hadn't learned yet was how little that mattered at altitude. Lucky Lois was number 3 in the low element, perfect position for an ambush. The first warning came from Eddie Mancini in the tail. 6 low, 2 Nicks climbing, range 1,000, closing fast. His voice was calm, like calling pitches. He flicked the safety to fire and leaned into the cradle of the twin Brownings. Each gun fed from a 600-round can, loaded with alternating armor-piercing and incendiary API and ball, the standard Pacific belt. At this range, even ball would tear through light skin like paper. The Key 45 seconds split, one angling under, one climbing above to rake the belly. Mancini, led by instinct, half a wingspan ahead, short 2-second burst. Tracers arced bright in the thin air and punched through the upper Nicks cockpit. The fighter's climb froze. The nose dipped. It tumbled away, streaming smoke. Vargas, in the top turret, caught the second one on its upward loop. His guns hammered, the muzzle blast flickering against the aluminum. 2 seconds later, the Nicks' right engine flamed, the nacelle erupting in orange. Good kill, Decker said, never taking his hands off the yoke. No one cheered. There wasn't time. A Zero slid through the gap in the formation from 4 o'clock high, diving straight for Lois. Ruiz in the waist tracked him through the window, firing short bursts, walking the tracers into the fighter's path. The Zero's pilot rolled to avoid and flew straight into Saito's field of fire up front. The nose turret spoke 2 streams converging on the fuselage. The 50 seconds shredded the light frame. At 300 yards, the Zero disintegrated, fragments tumbling through sunlight and smoke. Clean, Saito said, breathing hard. But the sky was still alive with movement. Decker's Liberator shook from near misses 20mm shells from another pair of Key 61 Tonys streaked across the formation. Their cannons fired at range, hoping to break the bomber stream apart. It didn't work. Top, 2 high left, range 800. Vargas swung the turret, squeezed for 1 second. His tracers met the lead Tony's nose just as it fired. The impact blew the engine cowling open like a peeled orange. The fighter rolled inverted and dropped out. Its wingman broke off immediately. By now, the radio crackled with reports: Bandit on tail, Bandit 3 high, gunner out of ammo left waist, confirm splash 1. The Japanese kept coming in bursts, 2 at a time, trying to trade speed for surprise. It was suicide. At 15,000 feet, the M2 Brownings had range and firepower unmatched in the Pacific. Each round left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second, still carrying enough kinetic energy after half a mile to punch clean through a radial engine block. Against Zero's and Tony's aircraft built for climb, not armor, every hit was catastrophic. The moment that broke the fight came just south of Wide Bay. 6 Zeros regrouped into a disciplined V and attacked in sequence, 1 from the nose, 2 from beam, 3 from astern. "Keep tight!" Decker shouted. The formation drew together until each bomber's fields of fire overlapped into a steel dome. The sky turned into geometry angles, lines, arcs of convergence. The first 3 fighters never made it to firing range. Twin and Quad, 50 seconds met them head-on, shredding fabric, splintering spars. The others broke off, scattering into clouds streaked with oil smoke and tracer glow. Then, silence. The radio hissed. Only the engines hummed. The 90th group leveled at 15,000 feet, leaving Rabaul's black columns behind. Decker looked back through the waste blister. The tail turret's barrels glowed dull red. Mancini flexed his hands, wrists trembling. "All that?" Vargas asked. "All that was 20 minutes. Mancini said quietly. 20 minutes, 12 fighters destroyed or damaged, and not a single Liberator lost. The M2S had done what the mission plan never expected. They'd turned bombers into their own escort. That night, mechanics counted bullet holes in Lucky Lois. 72 punctures in the fuselage, 1 in the right wing spar, 1,000 rounds of 50 calories expended. No injuries, no fires. The armorers said it was the best shooting they'd ever seen from a single ship. The Japanese called it impossible. But the numbers didn't lie. The Brownings had met Zeros at 15,000 feet and ripped them apart, 1 burst at a time. The 3rd of November 1943, the day after Rabaul. The 90th Bomb Group was still counting holes when reconnaissance photos arrived, black dots on Simpson Harbor, columns of smoke where destroyers and fuel depots had been. The mission was a success, but headquarters saw something else in those after-action reports. Japanese interceptors had broken off every pass after sustained 50 cal fire. For the first time, heavy bombers had outshot the Imperial Navy Air Service in open sky. The message was simple. The Browning M2 had changed the equation, but the Japanese weren't beaten, they were furious. Over Rabaul, the 253rd Kokotai's losses had been humiliating. 7 fighters down, 5 more damaged beyond repair. Their commander, Lieutenant Commander Matsuo Iida, ordered a new tactic: vertical attack. Dive through the formation from above, use gravity to close, and snap roll out before the Brownings could traverse. It worked on paper. In the real sky, at 15,000 feet, it would meet the same cold physics that had shredded them yesterday. 2 days later, Lucky Lois led the low element again. Target: WWII airfield itself. Japanese airframes were massed on the ground, replacement Zeros arriving from Truk. Weather-thin Cirrus at 16,000. Visibility perfect. No fighter escort again. "It's just us and the Brownings," Decker said. No one laughed. At 0950 hours, the Liberators hit the coast. The first flak burst painted the sky black over the airfield. 10 seconds later, the sun above them fractured into moving dots, 12, maybe 15. Zeros diving almost vertically. They came from 12 o'clock high. The exact angle doctrine said the 50 seconds couldn't track fast enough to catch. Vargas in the top turret was already swiveling, muscles locking the gyros. 12 high, coming fast, he shouted. "Hold her steady." Decker did. The first Zero's dive speed hit 400 miles per hour, too fast for human eyes to track long. But Saito, in the nose turret, had practiced this 100 times. You don't chase, you predict. He waited until the glint on the Zero's cowling crossed the ring of his sight, then squeezed the trigger for a 1-second burst, 27 rounds per barrel. The tracers rose, converged, and found the mark. The Zero disintegrated in a puff of smoke and fragments before it reached firing range. The next 2 dived through, firing wildly. Their 20mm shells stitched the air with orange sparks but hit nothing vital. Ruiz in the waist caught one on exit his. 50 seconds, tearing a 3-foot hole in the enemy's wing root. The fighter tumbled like a dead leaf. Vargas's turret rotated faster now, following the third wave. He didn't lead by sight, he used instinct. Years of shooting ducks and repairing engines. He knew how momentum carried steel. He waited for the moment the Zero's dive flattened, then fired a burst that crossed its path perfectly. 2 impacts, bright flashes, then a spray of debris as the Japanese plane folded mid-roll. "Got him," he muttered. "Got him clean." The fourth attack came from astern. Mancini already had his twin Brownings ready. He'd been tracking the formation behind them for a full minute. The tail guns roared, overlapping tracers forming an X in the sky. The lead Zero flew straight into it. At 15,000 feet, a 50 cal incendiary round burned at 1,500 degrees Celsius, enough to ignite gasoline vapors instantly. The Zero vanished in a white flash. The second pilot pulled up so hard his wings stalled and snapped off mid-climb. In less than 5 minutes, 10 fighters had attacked, and 9 were gone. The last one, a Key 61, Tony hung off at 2 o'clock, trying to climb above the formation. Vargas tracked him lazily, fired once. The Tony banked away without even testing them. By the time the formation reached the target, the sky was clear of interceptors. The bombs fell cleanly, rows of explosions walking across WWII's runways. Below, black smoke curled from shattered hangars. The gunners relaxed just enough to check ammunition. Nose, 250 left. Top, 300. Tail, 420. Each number was survival. Each belt another promise that no fighter would touch them today. On the interphone, Saito's voice came soft, almost awed. "They can't get close anymore." He wasn't wrong. The Japanese had built their tactics on speed and agility, on dancing inside gun arcs. The M2 erased that advantage. At 15,000 feet, a twin mount could project death over a mile away. Stable, accurate, unstoppable. The Zeros were fast, but the bullets were faster. Back at Nadzab, the gunners met at the revetments after debrief. Vargas laid his hands on the scorched barrels of his top turret. "She's tired," he said, half to himself. "But she never quits." Petty Officer Jones from the armory leaned in to measure wear. "We'll swap barrels before next run." "Same receivers." He tapped the M2's steel frame. "They'll outlive us all." News spread fast through 5th Air Force. The Liberator crews had discovered that the Brownings didn't just defend, they dominated. Air crews began flying higher, deliberately baiting interceptors into the killing arcs of their turrets. Japanese intelligence intercepted radio chatter calling the B 24 seconds air porcupines impossible to touch without bleeding. The following morning, a single phrase appeared on the mission board at Nadzab. "Trust the 50 seconds." It wasn't a slogan. It was gospel. The 10th of November 1943. 7 days since Rabaul. The 90th Bomb Group's Liberators had become legends across the Pacific. Crews joked that you could tell a Jolly Roger's ship by the burn marks on its gun barrels. The myth spread faster than the facts. Japanese fighters were starting to break off at the first flash of tracer fire, convinced the Americans had mounted some new secret weapon. They hadn't. Just old Brownings, tuned to perfection, fired by men who now understood what altitude, discipline, and physics could do. The next mission wasn't a strike on Rabaul or WWII. It was something different. Air Command wanted to test long-range raids north toward Truk beyond the reliable range of P-38 escorts, across weather and ocean, so empty that if you went down, you disappeared. The targets were oil storage tanks and docks on Moan Island, a 6-hour round trip at 15,000 feet. Fuel was tight, ammunition wasn't. The crews loaded to the limit 12,000 rounds per ship. Decker's Lucky Lois carried her usual crew, and one extra, an intelligence observer named Captain Paul Hewitt, a Harvard physicist who'd been sent to study why the Brownings worked so well at altitude. They took off at 0410 hours. The air thinned fast above the mountains. The climb was long and steady, engines straining, oxygen masks frosting. At 15,000 feet, temperature dropped below freezing. Metal popped and creaked. Hewitt took notes, muttering about air density and ballistic coefficients. "Your bullets actually fly truer up here," he said through the intercom. "Less drag, less yaw." Vargas grinned behind his mask. "Tell the Japs that," he said. At 0732. Radar out of Manus confirmed enemy interceptors, climbing from Truk 30 minutes out. The formation tightened. The gunners rotated turrets, checked solenoids, tapped their oxygen lines. Ruiz stripped the gloves off his right hand to feel the trigger better. The Japanese arrived 10 minutes later, sun glinting off silver-green fuselages. A 6 M50s, 20 of them, new model with thicker armor and heavier 20mm cannon. The Imperial Navy had brought its best to stop the raids. They came in from below, where the B-24's belly was blind. "Low 6, multiple contacts," Mancini shouted. Decker ordered evasive action, slight yaw, enough to expose the belly to the top turret's overlap. Vargas swung down, leading the climb of the first pair of Zeros. He waited for the shimmer of sunlight on their canopies, then opened fire. The M2S thundered, each casing spinning into the slipstream. The tracers dropped at first, then found their range. The lead Zero's cockpit burst into flame, trailing vapor that froze instantly into white ribbons. The second pulled vertical, then disintegrated mid-climb as the top turret's next burst found its wing tank. Below, the rest of the Zeros pressed in. The ball turret, a Sperry sphere with twin Brownings and barely room for a man, came alive. Sergeant Ronnie Bishop, the quietest man in the crew, spoke for the first time, all mission. "Got too low, left and right." His voice was steady, detached, like reporting weather. His first burst hit nothing, his second connected. The rounds cut through the nearest Zero's engine, cowling, sending the propeller spiraling away like a pinwheel. The fighter pitched upward, stalled, then fell. "He's done," Bishop said, switching right. 2 seconds later, his tracers carved across another Zero's fuselage. It folded clean in half. Decker's voice came soft. "Nice shooting, Ronnie." The surviving Japanese changed tactics, diving from the front instead. 5 Zeros came head-on, guns flashing. Saito in the nose turret had been waiting for that. He lined them up like targets on a firing range. His twin Brownings flamed, walking fire into the lead aircraft until it vanished in a fireball. The rest broke away, tracers snapping through empty air. At 15,000 feet, their engines struggled. Their superchargers weren't designed for thin air. The Brownings had no such problem. They kept their rhythm steady, unflinching, like typewriters writing in lead. Hewitt watched from the waist blister, scribbling in his notebook between bursts of fire. "You're not winning because you're lucky," he said. "You're winning because the math favors you. Their guns outrange you by 50 yards, but their bullets lose energy twice as fast. Yours don't slow down. At this altitude, your trajectory's flatter, your pattern tighter. It's science, not luck." The fight lasted 11 minutes. By the end, 11 Zeros were down, 4 smoking toward the sea, and the rest scattering into clouds. Not a single B-24 lost. The formation dropped its bombs on Moen, turned for home, and climbed back to 15,500 feet to clear a weather front. The radio stayed quiet, except for one voice, Vargas, still scanning the sky. "They'll tell stories about this," he said. "About Zeros burning like shooting stars." When the Liberators landed at Nadzab 10 hours after takeoff, mechanics counted 1,000 empty casings piled inside Lucky Lois. The barrels were blue from heat. Hewitt handed his notebook to Decker. "The numbers prove it," he said. "At 15,000 feet, the .50 caliber is the perfect weapon. It flies truer, hits harder, scares the hell out of them." Decker nodded. "Tell the brass," to stop changing what works. They didn't need new magic guns, or armor, or miracle technology. They just needed the same Browning M2 that had been designed in 1918, simple, reliable, patient. And gunners who knew how to make it sing at altitude. The 15th of November, 1943, Port Moresby. The 90th Bomb Group was changing. The men had started treating their Liberators less like bombers and more like airborne fortresses, flying anti-aircraft batteries wrapped in aluminum skin. Crews customized their M2 mounts, swapping feed trays, polishing bolt faces, hand-filing link chutes so the guns would never jam in thin, cold air. Ground crews called it superstition. Combat crews called it survival. Intelligence warned that the Japanese had adapted again. Reports from 5th Air Force reconnaissance said new interceptors, Ki 84 Franks, had arrived at WWII and Rabaul. Fast, tough, climbing to 35,000 feet. The old Zeros had been fragile. The Frank could take punishment and still fight. It carried armor behind the pilot and self-sealing tanks. At 15,000 feet, it would dive through the Liberators like a hawk through pigeons. That was the theory. At 0600 on the 15th, Lucky Lois led a dozen B-24 seconds toward WWII. The sun rose into their windshields, orange on silver wings. Each man behind a gun sight knew what was coming. Saito checked his sight illumination and rotated the Emerson nose turret twice full traverse. Vargas locked his top turret into ready position, 300 rounds per belt. Mancini re-greased the tail feed system with his finger and said the same line before every fight. "She'll talk when she's ready." Ruiz hung extra belts along the waist windows, loose coils of brass and steel. The first contact came 40 miles short of the target 5 dots, climbing fast from below. "Franks inbound, 4 o'clock low," Vargas shouted. They were beautiful and terrible machines, sleek, fast, cannon-armed. One made a head-on run. Saito fired at extreme range, a long burst that missed but forced the fighter to roll. The second came from below, climbing into the belly blind spot. The ball turret lit up. Bishop waited until the fighter filled his glass, then fired a measured 2-second burst. Every fifth tracer glowed white-hot in the cold air. The Frank tried to roll left, but his left wing tore off cleanly. Bishop's calm voice came over the interphone. "Scratch one." The Japanese came in waves of 4. The bombers held formation. Decker didn't jink. He trusted his gunners. "Keep the arcs tight," he said. "Don't waste ammo." Mancini tracked one Frank that climbed into the tail's kill zone. He waited for the shimmer, the perfect distance. The twin Brownings spoke. 2 bursts, 6 seconds apart. The fighter disintegrated. At 15,000 feet, even the armored Ki 84 couldn't soak that kind of firepower. The Brownings' 700-grain bullets, shredded metal, ripped through oil lines, cracked cylinder heads. One solid hit could unmake an airplane.